When I first heard about the Wendigo, it sounded like something straight out of a nightmare, a chilling spirit from Native American folklore that doesn't just haunt you, but takes over your very soul. We're talking about a relentless craving for human flesh. Legend says it roams the icy wilderness of northern Canada and parts of the United States, waiting in the shadows for the perfect moment to strike. People who've supposedly seen it describe it as a monstrous figure with glowing eyes, razor sharp claws, and an impossibly long tongue. It's said to move swiftly and silently, even over frozen lakes, never leaving a trace behind. Once someone falls under the Wendigo's control, they become consumed by an insatiable hunger. It's like they'd do anything, risk anything, just to satisfy that unnatural craving. They use their cunning and strength to slip away when cornered, making them nearly impossible to catch. That's why they say it's usually better to steer clear than to try your luck confronting such a creature. What makes the Wendigo truly terrifying is its ability to prey on the unsuspecting, turning ordinary people into mindless predators. This dark force has caused so much pain and turmoil over the years, and even today, the fear of the Wendigo still lingers. The worst part? Once it's taken hold of someone, there's no known way to reverse it. That's why it's crucial to stay informed and cautious, always aware that this sinister spirit could be lurking nearby. In late fall of 2010, my father, eldest brother, and I set out to the wilds of northern Canada for a moose hunt. With the air crisp and full of the promise of adventure, we left just before dawn, hoping to cover as much ground as we could by nightfall. We navigated the serpentine rivers and trudged over rapids, our spirits still high despite the long day. By late afternoon, we decided to set up camp about halfway to our destination, with Dad figuring we'd continue on in the morning. Once camp was made and everyone had settled in for the night, I took it upon myself to grab some firewood and head down to the riverbank to relieve myself just out of the comforting glow of our campfire. As I stood there, I heard rustling coming from the tree line about 15 yards away. Intrigued, I squinted into the darkness, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. That's when the air got thick with a nauseating odor, like something rotten left out in the sun. To my horror, the trees seemed to warp, their shadows shifting into a grotesque semblance of a face I recognized. It was one of my recently passed relatives, staring back at me with a haunting familiarity. "Hello," it whispered. "I've missed you. Come see me." Initially, I took a step forward, mesmerized, but something instinctive told me to stop. The expression on the familiar face shifted, turning gaunt and lifeless. Skin began to peel away, revealing something ghastly underneath. Fear gripped me as I realized I had unknowingly crept closer to the sinister figure, now a good distance from the firelight. As my senses kicked back in, I heard the voice change, its tone now harsh and reprimanding, urging me forward with growing aggression. I backed away, scrambling to return to the safety of our camp. But as I did, I turned to catch one final glimpse, a skeletal figure with rancid flesh clinging to exposed bones, hollow eyes boring into mine. I ran, heart pounding, but my attempts to yell for help were stifled by fear. The creature followed closely, its footsteps heavy and determined. As I scrambled up the riverbank, I felt a cold, skeletal hand seize my leg. Panicking, I clawed at the earth, finally finding my voice to shout for help. My brother, alerted by my cries, dashed over and hauled me up to safety, dragging me back to the warmth and light of our fire. I stammered through the tale of what I'd seen, desperate for them to believe me. To my relief, my brother nodded solemnly. "I saw it too," he whispered. "I know." His acknowledgement was a strange comfort, but confirmed the horror was real and shared. We stayed awake the rest of the night, rifles ready, and as soon as dawn broke, we packed up and returned home, vowing never to speak of the nightmarish encounter for fear of disbelief, or worse. The experience haunted me. For months, sleep eluded me, plagued by visions of dark figures lurking outside my window or whispers following me at night. I sought help from medicine men and shamans, tried protection charms and crystals, but nothing seemed to offer permanent relief. I eventually learned about the Wendigo, a creature of legend that preys on the vulnerable. If it touches you, they say, it latches on like a parasite, feeding off your fear. Unfortunately, mine had touched me. Now each time I step into the woods, places I once cherished, I'm filled with unease, compelled to keep my back against something solid. The wilderness I loved has become a place of caution and lingering dread. One night I was camping up in northern Michigan, enjoying a hunting trip, when something happened that I'll never forget. I woke up suddenly to the sound of rustling in my bags. I looked towards the entrance of my tent, and there it was, a small deer-like creature rummaging through my bear bag, which I had stupidly forgotten to hang. I yelled and swatted at it, but not before catching a whiff of an awful stench. The thing limped off, but not in a way that suggested it was hurt. It moved like a flash, faster than anything I've ever seen. It was gone in an instant. After gathering myself, I surveyed the damage. The creature hadn't taken much, just gnawed on the bag a bit. Trying to shake off the weirdness, I brewed some coffee, warmed up some soup, and then headed out to my hunting spot. About half an hour later, I settled into my spot. After roughly an hour and a half, I was rewarded for my patience. A magnificent buck came into view. I took the shot, landing it directly through the heart. Ecstatic with my successful hunt, I brought the deer back to camp, secured it in trash bags, and placed it in my oversized coolers. After sorting everything, I made myself some lunch, but couldn't quite shake that lingering smell from the previous night. I eventually dozed off listening to a podcast, waking around 5 p.m. to find my door slightly ajar. The space heater kept me warm, so I hadn't even noticed the chill. As I got up to secure the door, I noticed something in the opening. A deer, but something was off. It stood there, staring at me with matted fur, eyes too small for its head, and oddly twisted antlers. Panic surged through me as it seemed more curious than scared, backing away slowly. In the unnaturally silent woods, it felt as though it was studying me. I slammed the door shut, clutching my rifle like it was a lifeline, and spent the rest of the night in my sleeping bag, eyes glued to the door. Around 5 a.m., a terrifying noise jolted me awake, the sound of metal being torn apart. I charged out of the hut, rifle ready and headlamp on full blast. Huge mistake. Rounding the corner, I froze at the sight of a creature, upright on two legs, resembling a bear but gaunt with antlers. Its eyes were enormous, staring right through me. Instinct took over. I fired, not proud of my reaction, but it lunged at me the moment I pulled the trigger, knocking me to the ground. In my scramble, I fired once more. It screamed, an unholy sound somewhere between a gorilla and a banshee. I ran like hell, adrenaline keeping me moving until I reached the fence in my backyard. Covered in cuts and gripping my gun so tight my knuckles were white, I hesitated, hearing nothing but eerie silence. Then, from a few yards away, the same deer from before appeared, its empty eyes reflecting my fear. I emptied the rest of my ammo into it, dropping it where it stood, only to hear it let out another haunting scream. In a panic, I woke my family and called the police, who searched the area. When they examined the deer, it seemed deflated, like a hollow husk of skin. It was like something had worn the animal as a disguise. A couple of days later, as I looked out the window, I spotted a massive buck, a hole near its heart, watching with small orange eyes. I haven't left the house since. Every time I peer into the night, I sense more of them lurking just out of sight. Fear has taken over, and my family and I have barricaded ourselves in the basement. The car tires are slashed, and my motorcycle has disappeared. Just hours before writing this, I found the garage door torn from its hinges, a chilling reminder that whatever's out there isn't done with me yet. It was a chilly night in late November in Boulder, Colorado, and my friends and I were doing what we usually did, driving around. We spent the night just cruising through town, talking, and enjoying ourselves without much direction. Earlier, I had been reading about the Wendigo and watching videos of native elders sharing stories about these mysterious creatures. The topic fascinated me. Coincidentally, one of my buddies had brought his girlfriend along, who happened to be Native American. Curious, I asked her if she'd ever heard of the Wendigo. She nodded and said yes, which only fueled my intrigue. Eventually, we decided to drive up the mountain past a place known as Flagstaff, up on the Flatirons. It's a thickly wooded area far from the city, gorgeous by day but eerily spooky by night. No matter how many times I've been there after dark, I always get this weird, unsettling feeling that something sinister lurks in those woods. This gut feeling existed long before I ever knew about the Wendigo or entertained any belief in the supernatural. I'd even heard stories of strange orange lights floating around there, but I never thought much about it. We parked at a familiar hiking spot right in front of the trailhead. Suddenly, a wave of darkness washed over me. Something felt off, like the air was thick with mystery and unease. While my friends chatted away, I found myself zoning out, my gaze fixed deep into the pines. In the pale moonlight, I saw what looked like children darting between the trees. My gut told me something was wrong. There was no way kids would be playing in the woods at 3 a.m. And the way they moved was just unnatural. I felt a mix of fear and fascination, like I was hypnotized. As I watched, these kids started running in a tight circle, and a strange, blurry mist began to form. That's when I saw it, a classic Wendigo slowly materializing out of the mist. It was a tall, slender white figure, its jaw hanging open in an impossible gape, and its long hands swaying in a haunting dance, all while fixating on me. Both the kids and the Wendigo seemed to flicker, fading in and out of reality like spirits. I finally spoke up, telling my friends what I was seeing. They laughed it off, thinking I was messing around. As quickly as they had appeared, the Wendigo and the children vanished from sight. To this day, the memory sticks with me. The detail was far too vivid for it to have been my imagination. Perhaps those children were something like the black-eyed kids I've heard about since, but one thing's for sure, whatever I saw that night was beyond explanation.